Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about where you can land an airplane and where you cannot, based on the FAA regulations. So I've always wondered whether or not I could just fly over to like a open desert, touch down for the night, go camping, fly out the next morning, something like that. I obviously see a lot of people do that online sometimes, even in like a dirt strip in the middle of a forest. I see people touch down there. Lots of random places that obviously is not a runway. So we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. That's where it gets complicated. But let's just start with the basics. The FAA regulation that goes over how low you can go. So that's going to be 91.119, and it goes over all the minimum safe altitudes. So the very first line pretty much right away tells us that we can land and take off wherever. It doesn't even specify that it needs to be from a runway. It doesn't say any of that. It just says, except when necessary for takeoff or landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. So whenever the pilot deems necessary to land, then cool, you can go land in that area. Moving down, it goes over congested areas with a lot of people or a lot of buildings. You're not allowed to fly below 1,000 feet. And that would be the yellow area on the VFR sectional. So anywhere in those, you'd have to stay 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle. Pretty simple. So that's a no-go. And then in other than congested areas, everything except that yellow area on the VFR sectional, you're technically allowed to go 500 feet above the surface. And this is where it gets a little vague and tough to interpret, but it says over open bodies of water or sparsely populated areas, you're allowed to go a little bit lower as long as you're not operating within 500 feet of a person or vehicles, other stuff like that. Obviously, I would probably stick to the bush planes, the Super Cub planes, stuff like that. But legally, if you want to go pull up in the Cessna and possibly pop the tires, I guess you can do so. But we also got to remember regulation 91.13. And if you go to a wild terrain area and land the Cessna and crash for some reason, they might get you with reckless operations. So maybe stick to the planes that are meant to go off terrain, off runway. When I was researching this online, it seemed like a lot of people were saying you're not allowed to do flyovers below 500 feet, or the FAA is going to get you because you're not allowed to go below 500 feet in general. But after just reading the regulation, all it says is in sparsely populated areas where there's no people, no buildings, no vehicles, you are allowed to go below 500 feet. So it seems like those people were incorrect, but let me know down in the comments if I'm missing something. Other than that, after reading this, it seems like you are allowed to do low flyovers to inspect the zone that you're planning on landing in, and then come back around and actually do the landing. So just make sure it's a area with nothing around. One thing you have to watch out for is wildlife areas. You're not supposed to go below 2,000 feet in those. I'm gonna pull up Reg 7-5-6. It basically says you have to contact the respective agency if you're planning on landing in a national park or a wildlife service area. And each city or state kind of has its own rules on whether or not you're allowed to land on like private property or roads. Safe to say you're not until you get that approved for most places. But when it comes to open areas, there's land called BLM land. And in a second here, I'm going to call up the BLM department, the Bureau of Land Management agency, and ask them if there's any places that are legal to land in California. And then after that, I'm going to call up Joshua Tree National Park and see if they allow any different areas that you're allowed to land at.
BLM, this is Dan.
Hey there. I just had a quick question for like a research project that I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah, they just transferred me over to you. Basically, I was just wondering if it's legal to land and take off like a bush plane in any of the BLM land areas because they're all considered the public land. Because I know like the FAA rules on it, they technically allow it if it's not within 500 feet of a person or a building or a vehicle. But then
Yep.
obviously you guys have like your own rules and whatnot. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, so once it's on the ground, it's basically they're treated kind of as motorized vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
you got to follow whatever designation is on the ground. There's certain areas, like where are you located at?
I'm in California. They weren't answering, so I just tried you guys.
Okay.
You're in the Nevada one?
I'm in Nevada, Carson City area.
Okay.
I mean, so there's areas like wilderness study areas, national conservation areas that prohibit such acts.
That's a no-go. Yeah.
And then there's areas like we have travel management areas. Some of them are for Nevada. I don't know if California has open designation, but we have open designation across the majority of Nevada, which would be fine.
Okay.
But then we also have limited to existing routes. So those basically routes that were in existence when that was published. For like our office, that was 2001.
Sure.
And then we have limited to designated routes, which have gone through travel management planning, which most of California has, and they have their routes. So
the best way to figure out if I was like hypothetically going to do a flight and then know the area that I'm going to go to, would I just call, or there is like a
I would
document?
definitely reach out to that office.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, if you can get a hold of someone over in the BLM Moab office in Moab, Utah, they are far more familiar with the regulations because they've been working on stuff related to it.
Okay, so basically the best way to go about it is to always just like call ahead of time and find out if it's open to users.
Yep, exactly.
But if I were to tell you like a random place in your jurisdiction like Nevada, you'd be able to look it up and see if it was open to vehicles, or do you not
I
have
would
that?
be, yep.
Oh, okay, cool.
I would be, yep.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Oh, that's pretty helpful then. Sweet. Honestly, that's kind of all I was looking for. Yeah, you really know a lot about that. Thanks for the help.
I've had this question before.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, appreciate everything. You have a great day.
All right. You as well.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Well, in conclusion, after talking to Dan at the BLM department in Nevada, as long as you're abiding by 91-119 and picking out a sparsely populated area, then that's step number one. Then you're going to want to make sure it's not a wilderness area. You're not allowed to land in those areas at all. You can also just do that when you're on the phone with the BLM department, which is step 3. Call them up, pick out your area in advance. Then you can specifically call that state BLM department and ask them about that area, and specifically if it's accessible to motorized vehicles. If they say yes, then I guess you're allowed to go over there and do your little flight over there, do a low flyover, check it out, make sure there's no people, buildings, vehicles, anything like that, so that you're still good with the FAA, and do your low flyover, come back around, come into land, and good to go. Pretty cool, right? Obviously, all the areas out there are going to be different, so make sure you're always call in advance. Don't take my entire word for it. Do a little bit of research on your own. And to end this off, I'm going to call up Joshua Tree National Park. Just for the hell of it, they're probably going to say hell nah, but I'm going to ask them if there's any areas that are legal to land within the park. So that's it.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hi. Sorry, just a quick question. Bit of a crazy question, but I was just wondering if if it's legal to like anywhere in the Joshua Tree Park to do like a landing and a takeoff in an airplane.
I've never heard of anything like that. No. But
Okay.
I would assume the reason why you find online that this is something that would technically be legal is because it's like considered government property.
Yeah.
So dependent on if they could get that approval, but typically, they have that in place because of, helicopters, for example, for emergency situations.
Oh, wait, I guess one more thing. So if is there like somebody you would be able to ask like this question like for permission, or it would only be for like an emergency
you'd have to go through the permits office. So it depends on what the permits office would allow and not allow, but they would have to go, through extensive approval processes.
Oh, okay. It's pretty difficult to get that approved and
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, definitely not worth doing all that. But thanks
Yeah.
for at least letting me know.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
one.
Bye.
Bye.